I moved into the house on a Tuesday, the kind of day where the sun hangs heavy and golden, painting everything in sharp relief. It was a small place, single-story, faded yellow siding, a porch that creaked underfoot. The realtor had called it a steal, and I'd signed the papers without much thought. I didn't notice the shadows or the lack of them until I started unpacking. The living room was bright, sunlight streaming through the big bay window, but my boxes sat there, edges crisp against the hardwood, with no dark outlines trailing behind them. I held up a lamp, twisted it in my hand, no shadow. Not on the floor, not on the wall. I chalked it up to some trick of the light, a quirk of the windows. Houses have personalities, I told myself. This one just didn't like to play by the rules. That first night, I slept fine. The bed was new, the mattress still smelling of plastic wrap, and the quiet was a relief after years in apartments with paper-thin walls. But the next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I stood in the kitchen at noon, the sun blasting through the glass, and watched my coffee mug sit on the counter, perfectly lit, perfectly shadowless. I waved my hand over it, expecting a flicker of darkness. Nothing. My skin prickled, but I laughed it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the house was built at some weird angle. I wasn't a physicist, I didn't need to understand it. By the third day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I took a flashlight into the bathroom, the one room with no windows, and clicked it on. The beam hit the sink, the tiles, the mirror, everything glowed, but nothing cast a shadow. I stood there, heart-thudding, waving the light across my face. No silhouette on the wall behind me. I checked the bulb, the batteries, even hauled a mirror from the bedroom to see if it was me. The reflection stared back, normal as ever, brown hair, tired eyes, but the space around it stayed flat, empty. I whispered, "What the hell is this place?" The words hung in the air unanswered. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bedroom felt too still, the moonlight pooling on the floor without edges or depth. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it, a faint shuffle like bare feet on wood. My pulse spiked. I lived alone. I sat up, eyes darting to the corner of the room. It was empty, just the dresser and a stack of unpacked boxes. But the sound came again, closer, a deliberate step. I flicked on the bedside lamp, bathing the room in soft yellow. Nothing. No one. I exhaled, rubbing my face. "You're losing it," I muttered, and forced myself to lie back down. I don't know what woke me. The clock said 2:47 a.m., the lamp still on, its glow steady. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened. I turned my head, slow, reluctant, and that's when I saw it. In the corner where the dresser met the wall stood my shadow. Not a vague blur, but sharp, exact, my silhouette, head tilted slightly, arms loose at its sides. I froze, breath caught in my throat. I was lying in bed, flat on my back, but there it was, standing upright, motionless. I blinked hard, thinking it'd vanish. It didn't. It stayed, pinned against the wall like a cutout, staring at me, or at least, that's how it felt. No eyes, no face, just the shape of me watching. I scrambled upright, sheets tangling around my legs. "What are you?" I rasped, voice cracking. It didn't move. I swung my legs over the bed, keeping it in sight, and reached for the lamp. My fingers brushed the switch and I hesitated. If I turned it off, would it disappear? Or would it stay, lurking in the dark? I glanced at the window, moonlight still poured in, shadowless as ever. My stomach twisted. This wasn't the lamp's doing. This was something else. I stood, legs shaky, and took a step toward it. The floor creaked, loud in the silence. The shadow didn't flinch. Another step. It was taller than me, I realized, stretched just enough to feel wrong. My throat burned with every shallow breath. "This isn't real," I said, more to myself than to it. But then it shifted, just a twitch, a slight tilt of its head, mirroring me. I stopped, ice flooding my veins. It wasn't on the wall anymore. It was in the corner, freestanding, a void cut from the air itself. I backed away, hitting the bed, and it took a step forward. One slow, deliberate stride. No sound, no weight, just the shape of me closing the distance. I didn't scream. I couldn't. All I could do was watch as it came closer, its edges sharpening, and wonder where my shadow had been hiding all this time. My apologies for the mix-up. I jumped ahead to the next story when you said next, assuming you meant to move to windows to nowhere. I'll finish House Without Shadows first as requested. Here's part 2 to wrap it up, bringing the total length to around 1,500 to 1,600 words as per your range. Let's dive back in. It was closer now, my shadow, or whatever it was pretending to be me. The room seemed to shrink around it, the air growing thick and sour like something rotting just out of sight. I stumbled back onto the bed, my hands gripping the sheets, eyes locked on that dark shape. It didn't rush me, it didn't need to. Every step was slow, deliberate, like it knew I had nowhere to go. The lamp's light flickered, just once, and in that split second, I swore its edges sharpened, grew claws where my fingers should have been. I lunged for the door, bare feet slapping the hardwood. The hallway stretched out before me, the same shadowless glow from the windows bathing it in a sickly yellow. I didn't look back, I couldn't. My lungs burned as I hit the living room, aiming for the front door. The knob was cold in my hand, slick with sweat, and I twisted it hard. It didn't budge. I yanked again, then pounded on the wood, screaming, "Let me out." The sound died flat, swallowed by the house. A creak behind me. I spun around, and there it was, standing at the end of the hall, head cocked like it was curious. My shadow, my shape, but taller now, stretched thin, its arms dangling too long. My knees buckled. "What do you want?" I croaked. It didn't answer. It just took another step, silent as death, and I saw it wasn't alone. Behind it, more shapes peeled from the walls, faint outlines at first, then solid, dark. A child's silhouette, small and hunched. An old woman, her head bowed. A man with broad shoulders. None of them mine, but all of them moving, closing in. I ran for the kitchen, the only place left. The back door was there, my last shot. My hands shook as I fumbled with the lock, the deadbolt sticking, then finally giving way. I threw it open and stopped cold. Beyond the threshold wasn't the yard or the alley I'd seen when I moved in. It was a void, black and endless, like the house had been plucked from the world and set adrift. A faint wind brushed my face, carrying a smell like damp earth and copper. I turned back, and they were there, the shadows filling the kitchen doorway. My doppelganger stood at the front, its head tilted, mimicking me again. The others flanked it, their forms twitching, edges blurring like they were fraying apart. I pressed myself against the open door, the void at my back, the shadows in front. My chest heaved, breath shallow and useless. I didn't ask for this, I whispered, more plea than defiance. It stepped closer, and I saw it then, its face, or where a face should have been. A hollow, a pit deeper than the dark around it, and in that emptiness, something moved. Eyes, maybe, or teeth. My stomach lurched. The others followed, their shapes warping, limbs stretching, heads lolling. I couldn't tell if they were reaching for me or unraveling into the air. My shadow raised an arm, slow, deliberate, and pointed at me. No, not at me. Past me. Into the void. I didn't think. I turned and jumped. The fall was instant, endless. No ground rushed up, no wind roared past, just silence, thick and suffocating. I twisted, flailing, and caught a glimpse of the house above me, its open door a faint square of light shrinking fast. Shadows crowded the frame, watching, my own at the center. Then it was gone, swallowed by the black. I don't know how long I fell, or if I'm still falling. There's no up, no down, just this cold, weightless nothing. Sometimes I feel it, though, a presence close but unseen. My shadow, maybe, or the others trailing me through the dark. I can't scream anymore. My voice is gone. But I know one thing, I didn't lose my shadow in that house. It found me. And it's not done with me yet. I bought the house because it was cheap, a narrow two-story wedged between sagging row homes in a part of town no one bothered to fix up. The windows were the first thing I noticed, too many of them. From the outside it looked normal, two up top, one by the door, a couple in back. But inside there were extras. A small, clouded pane in the hallway that didn't match the exterior wall. A tall, thin one in the upstairs closet, streaked with grime. I figured they'd been boarded up or built over, relics of some old renovation. I didn't think much of it until I started cleaning. The hallway window was the worst. It was set low, about knee-height, its glass so murky I couldn't see through it. I scrubbed it with vinegar and a rag, expecting to find brick or siding on the other side. Instead, the grime came away in smears, revealing a street. Not the alley that ran behind the house with its cracked pavement and overflowing bins, this was different. Cobblestones glistened under gas lamps, their light flickering like something out of a dream. Buildings loomed, tall and crooked, their windows dark. I pressed my face closer, breath fogging the glass. There were people out there, faint shapes moving in the haze, too far to make out. I stumbled back, heart thumping. That shouldn't be there. I ran outside, circling the house, counting windows. The exterior wall where the hallway pane sat was solid brick, weathered and unbroken. No frame, no glass, nothing. Back inside, I stared at it again. The street was still there, unchanged, the figures drifting like ghosts. I tapped the glass, tentative. It was cold, solid. I told myself it was a trick, an old mirror, maybe, or some weird projection. But my gut wouldn't buy it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked, settling into itself, but every groan felt like it came from that window. I lay there, eyes on the ceiling, until I heard it, a soft knock. Not at the front door, not from the walls. It was sharp, rhythmic, echoing from the hallway. I sat up, sheets pooling around me, and listened. Knock. Knock. Pause. Knock. My mouth went dry. I grabbed my phone, using its light to guide me, and crept toward the sound. The hallway was dim, the window a faint smudge against the wall. The knocking stopped as I got close, but now I could see them, faces pressed against the glass, pale and blurred, staring in. My phone trembled in my hand, the light catching their eyes, wide and unblinking. There were 3 of them, maybe 4, their features smeared like wet paint. One opened its mouth, a black hole, and the glass vibrated with a low, muffled hum. I staggered back, the light swinging wild, and they followed me with their heads tracking every step. "Who are you?" I whispered, voice barely there. The humming grew louder, insistent, and then words broke through, soft, overlapping, like a chorus of whispers. "Come out! Come out!" My skin crawled. I bolted to my room, slamming the door, and wedged a chair under the knob. The knocking didn't follow, but the whispers seeped through the walls, faint and endless. "Come out! Come out!" I didn't sleep. Dawn came slow, gray light filtering through my bedroom window, the real one, the one that showed the street I knew. I checked the hallway. The window was there, murky again, no faces, no street. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox and swung. The glass cracked, spiderwebbing, but didn't shatter. I hit it again, harder. The crack spread, but the hammer bounced back like I'd struck rubber. Behind the fractures, the cobblestone street flickered into view, gas lamps glowing. The faces were back, closer now, their mouths moving in sync. "Come out!" I dropped the hammer, hands shaking. I couldn't break it. I ran outside again, checking the brick wall, still solid, still blank. Back inside, I taped a blanket over the window, duct tape straining to hold it. The whispers stopped, muffled by the fabric, but I could feel them waiting. That night, I stayed in the living room, lights on, TV blaring static to drown out the silence. I thought I'd won, that I'd blocked them out. Until I heard it again. Knock. Knock. Not from the hallway this time. I turned, slow, dread pooling in my gut. The sound was coming from the closet upstairs, the other window, the tall one I hadn't touched yet. And it wasn't stopping. The knocking from the closet upstairs was sharper than before, a staccato beat that cut through the TV's static like a blade. I didn't move at first, just sat there on the sagging couch, staring at the ceiling, willing it to stop. It didn't. Knock. 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 Each tap tightened the knot in my chest. I'd ignored that window, the tall, grimy one tucked behind a rack of musty coats. I told myself it was nothing, just another quirk of this busted house. But now it was calling me, and the blanket over the hallway window felt like a flimsy lie. I grabbed the hammer again, its weight cold in my palm, and climbed the stairs. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with a damp, sour smell I hadn't noticed before. The knocking didn't falter, steady as a pulse. I reached the closet door, peeling paint, warped wood, and hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob, sweat beading on my neck. "Leave me alone," I muttered, half plea, half threat. The knocking paused just for a second, then started again, louder, insistent. I yanked the door open. The coats swayed faintly like something had brushed them, and there it was, the window, stretching from floor to ceiling, its glass streaked with filth. No faces yet, just darkness beyond, but the knocking rattled the frame, vibrating up my spine. I raised the hammer ready to smash it when the grime shifted, wiped clean from the other side. A street appeared, not the cobblestone one from downstairs, but a different scene, a narrow alley, brick walls slick with rain, a single bulb swinging overhead. Shadows moved in the gloom, too tall, too thin. Then they were there. Faces pressed against the glass, not blurred this time, sharp, pale, with eyes too big, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. They didn't knock with hands. Their foreheads tapped the pane, rhythmic, relentless, smearing wet streaks across it. "Come out," they hissed, voices scraping through the glass, layered and wrong. I swung the hammer hard. It hit with a dull thunk, the glass flexing but not breaking, the impact jarring my arm. The faces didn't flinch, just kept tapping, staring, their lips curling into jagged grins. I swung again, screaming now, "Get out of my house." The glass held, mocking me, and the alley beyond pulsed, the bulb flickering faster. One of them, a woman maybe, her hair lank and dripping, pressed a hand to the window. Her fingers were long, knuckles bulging, nails clawing at the surface. The glass groaned, a high whine, and a crack split down the center. Not enough to shatter it, but enough to make me drop the hammer and stumble back, tripping over the coats. The whispering turned to a chant. "Come out! Come out! Come out!" It wasn't just from the closet now, it echoed from downstairs, from the hallway window I'd covered. I scrambled to my feet, slamming the closet door shut, and ran to my room. I barricaded myself in, shoving the dresser against the door, piling books and boxes on top. The knocking followed, fainter but everywhere, seeping through the walls. I curled up on the bed, hands over my ears, muttering, this isn't real, until my throat ached. Morning came, weak and gray. The knocking had stopped, but the silence was worse, too heavy, too deliberate. I crept downstairs, avoiding the closet, and checked the hallway window. The blanket was still taped up, sagging slightly, but I could hear it, a faint tap, tap, tap from beneath. I didn't dare pull it down. Upstairs, the closet door was shut, but the sour smell lingered, stronger now, clinging to my clothes. I couldn't stay. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and bolted for the front door. It opened this time, the street outside dull and familiar, trash cans, cracked pavement, the real world. I locked the house behind me, hands shaking, and walked to the corner store, pretending I could escape it. But as I glanced back, I saw it, a flicker in the upstairs window, the one that matched the outside. A face, pale and grinning, watching me go. I haven't gone back. I'm crashing at a motel now, the kind with buzzing neon and stained carpets, but I can't shake the feeling they're still there, waiting. Last night, I woke up to a single knock on the motel window. I didn't look. I don't want to know what's out there or what's trying to pull me back in. I noticed it the first night, though I didn't trust my senses enough to call it real. The house was old, a sagging Victorian I'd rented dirt cheap because no one else wanted it. The walls were papered in faded florals, the floors warped from years of neglect. I'd moved in with a duffel bag and a sleeping mat, too broke for furniture, and figured the creaks and groans were just the place settling. But as I lay there in the dark, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling, I felt it, a faint pulse, like the walls were exhaling. It wasn't loud, just a soft push of air, rhythmic, in and out. I pressed my hand to the plaster. It was warm, trembling slightly under my fingers. I pulled back, heart thudding, and told myself it was the wind, or pipes, or my imagination running wild after a long day. By morning, I'd half convinced myself it was nothing. The sun spilled through the dusty windows, and the house felt still, ordinary. I explored a little, 3 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen with a chipped sink, a basement door I didn't bother opening. The breathing didn't come back, not during the day. I unpacked what little I had, set up a kettle, tried to make it mine. But that night, it started again. Stronger this time. I was brushing my teeth when I felt the wall behind me shudder, a slow, deep inhale that made the mirror rattle. I froze, toothpaste dripping down my chin, and watched the reflection. The room seemed to flex, just for a second, then went still. I spat into the sink and whispered, "What is this place?" I couldn't sleep after that. I lay on my mat in the living room, staring at the walls, feeling them move. It wasn't my imagination, the air shifted with each pulse, warm and damp, like breath on my skin. I got up, barefoot, and paced the house, following the rhythm. It was everywhere, upstairs, the hallway, even the closet under the stairs. The whole damn place was alive, inhaling, exhaling, steady as a heartbeat. I grabbed a flashlight and decided to check the basement. If there was an answer, it'd be down there, right? Old houses always hide their secrets in the dark. The door stuck at first, swollen in its frame, but I shoved it open. A blast of humid air hit me, thick with a smell like wet earth and meat. The stairs creaked under my weight, splintered wood biting into my soles. At the bottom, the flashlight beam swept across concrete, cracked, stained, littered with broken crates. The breathing was louder here, a low wheeze that vibrated through my chest. I swung the light around, searching for vents, pipes, anything that could explain it. Nothing. Just walls, damp and glistening, pulsing in time with the sound. Then I saw it. In the far corner, tucked behind a rusted water heater, something gleamed, wet, red, alive. I stepped closer, breath shallow, and the beam caught it full on, a heart. Not a human one, too big, the size of a dog maybe, fleshy and veined, anchored to the floor by tendrils of sinew. It beat, slow and heavy, each thud sinking with the walls upstairs. My stomach heaved. I backed away, the flashlight shaking, and tripped over a crate. The beam spun wild, and for a second I swore the heart twitched, its surface rippling like it knew I was there. I scrambled up the stairs, slamming the door behind me, and leaned against it, panting. The breathing didn't stop, it rolled through the house, steady, unperturbed. I grabbed my phone, thinking I'd call someone, anyone, but who? The landlord? The cops? What would I say? "Hey, my house has a heart in the basement?" I laughed, a cracked, desperate sound, and sank to the floor. The pulse pressed against my back through the door, warm, alive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there, listening, feeling it. By morning, the breathing softened, faded to a whisper, but I knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. I couldn't leave, not yet. I had nowhere else to go. But as I sat there, staring at the basement door, I realized something worse. The rhythm was slowing, syncing with my own breaths, my own heartbeat. And I didn't know what that meant. I couldn't stay away from the basement. Not after that night. The house wouldn't let me, its breathing followed me everywhere, a constant hum under my skin. By noon, I was back at the door, hands trembling as I gripped the knob. The air felt heavier now, like it was pushing me down the stairs. I had to know what it was, what it wanted. I flicked on the flashlight and descended, the steps groaning louder than before, the meaty smell thickening with every breath I took. The heart was still there, pulsing in its corner, slick and swollen. It looked bigger now, or maybe that was the fear twisting my eyes. The tendrils anchoring it had spread, thin red threads weaving into the concrete, disappearing into cracks. I crouched, keeping my distance, and watched it beat. Each thud sent a ripple through the basement walls, a faint echo of the house's rhythm. My chest tightened, my own heartbeat was matching it again, slow and deliberate, like it was pulling me in. I pressed a hand to my ribs, counting. 1, 2, thud. 1, 2, thud. Perfect sync. I whispered, "What are you?" The heart didn't answer, but the breathing hitched just once, a sharp inhale that made the floor tremble. I stood, backing toward the stairs, when something dripped onto my shoulder. Warm, sticky? I swung the flashlight up. The ceiling was wet, glistening, beads of red welling up and falling like slow tears. One hit my cheek, and I wiped it off, smearing it across my fingers. Blood. Not mine. My stomach lurched, and I bolted for the stairs, but the door slammed shut before I could reach it. I pounded on it, screaming, "Open! Let me out!" The wood pulsed under my fists, warm and yielding, like skin. The breathing surged, louder, faster, a wet rasp filling the basement. I turned, pressing my back to the door, and saw the heart swelling, each beat stretching it tighter, the tendrils thickening, snaking toward me across the floor. They moved slow, deliberate, like roots hunting water. I grabbed the flashlight and swung it like a club, smashing one. It burst, spraying red across my shoes, but more kept coming, curling around crates, climbing the walls. The air grew hot, stifling, the smell choking me, blood and rot and something alive. I slid down the door, legs giving out, and watched the tendrils close in. They didn't touch me, not yet, just circled, hovering inches away. The heart thudded harder, and the walls upstairs answered, a chorus of groans that shook dust from the rafters. I clutched my head, whispering, "Stop, stop, stop," but it didn't. It wouldn't. The tendrils brushed my ankle, soft and damp, and I kicked them away, scrambling to my feet. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and gurgling like it was forcing its way through water. "Stay." It came from the heart, or maybe the walls, I couldn't tell. My skin crawled. "Stay," it said again, clearer, insistent. The tendrils lunged, wrapping my calves, tugging me toward the corner. I screamed, clawing at the door, but it held fast, pulsing against my back. The floor tilted, or maybe it was me, dragged inch by inch, the flashlight slipping from my hand. I don't know how I broke free. 1 second, the tendrils had me, the next, they slackened, and I was running, tripping up the stairs. The door gave way, spitting me into the hallway, and I slammed it shut, wedging a chair under the knob. The breathing slowed, but it didn't stop. It never stopped. I collapsed on the floor, chest heaving, my heartbeat still locked to the house's rhythm. Blood streaked my arms, my legs, not mine, not all of it. I could feel it drying, tightening my skin. I didn't leave the house that day. I couldn't. My keys were downstairs, my phone dead, and the windows, God, the windows were fogged with a film I didn't dare touch. Night came, and the breathing grew louder, a wet, hungry sound. I sat in the living room, staring at the basement door, listening as the heart beat on. It wasn't just alive. It was awake. And it knew I was still here. By morning I felt it in me, the pulse, the warmth, the need to go back. My hands shook as I stood, drawn to the door again. I didn't want to, but my feet moved anyway, step by step, like the house was pulling me home. The chair slid aside with a scrape, and the knob turned in my grip, slick with sweat, or maybe something else. I opened the door, and the breathing swallowed me whole. The basement door swung wide, and I stepped through, the air rushing past me like a sigh. The stairs were slick under my bare feet, coated in that same damp film I'd seen on the ceiling. The breathing was deafening now, a wet, shuddering roar that drowned out my own ragged gasps. I didn't want to go down there, I swear I didn't, but my body moved anyway, pulled by something deeper than fear. The flashlight was gone, left somewhere in the chaos, but I didn't need it. The heart lit the basement with its own glow, a sickly red pulse that painted the walls in throbbing shadows. It had grown. The heart filled half the room now, its surface stretched taut, veins bulging like ropes. The tendrils were everywhere, crawling up the walls, weaving through the floor, curling around the stairs behind me. They didn't grab me this time. They didn't need to. I walked straight to it, close enough to feel the heat rolling off its flesh, close enough to see the rhythm match my own heartbeat, fast now, panicked, alive. "Stay," the voice gurgled again, thick and pleading, bubbling up from the heart's core. I reached out, trembling, and touched it. The surface was warm, soft, yielding under my fingers like dough. The house groaned, a deep, satisfied sound, and the tendrils shivered, tightening their grip on the walls. My hand sank deeper, sucked in up to the wrist, and I yanked back, but it held me firm, gentle, like a mother's grasp. Blood oozed around my arm, hot and thick, and I felt it then. A second pulse, not mine, threading through me. The house wasn't just breathing. It was claiming me. I screamed, thrashing, but the sound died in my throat, swallowed by the wet rasp filling the air. The heart swelled again, its beat slowing, forcing mine to follow. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, arms still trapped. The tendrils moved then, slow and deliberate, wrapping my legs, my waist, my chest. Not to pull, but to hold. They were warm, pulsing in time with the heart, and I couldn't fight anymore. My vision blurred, the red glow fading to black at the edges, and that voice came again, softer now, almost tender. Stay. I don't know how long I sat there, pinned by its grip, drowning in its rhythm. Hours, maybe days. Time melted away, meaningless in the dark. When I woke, if you can call it that, the tendrils were gone, my arm free, but the house was different. The walls upstairs didn't just pulse. They flexed, rippling like muscle under skin. The air was thick, humid, alive with that meaty stench. I stumbled to the kitchen, legs weak, and saw it. The sink, clogged with red, bubbling up slow and steady. The windows wept crimson streaks, sealing me in. I'm still here. I can't leave, the doors won't open, the windows won't break. My heartbeat doesn't feel like mine anymore. It's too slow, too deep, matching the house's every breath. I tried cutting the tendrils once with a knife I found in a drawer. They bled, and so did I, red pooling from my arms like we were one. I stopped fighting after that. Last night I felt it shift. The heart's beat grew louder, faster, and the walls tightened, pressing in. I think it's hungry. I think it's been hungry all along, and I was never the tenant, just the meal. I sit here now, writing this on scraps of wallpaper, listening to it breathe, feeling it inside me. If you find this house, don't come in. Don't touch the walls. Don't listen when it calls you to stay. Because it's not just alive. It's waiting, and it'll take you too. I bought the house sight unseen, a foreclosure deal too good to pass up. The listing said one-story, ranch style, a squat little thing with peeling paint and a weedy yard. Perfect for a fresh start, I thought, quiet, simple, mine. I moved in on a Friday, hauling boxes under a gray sky that threatened rain. The place was as advertised, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with cracked linoleum, a living room that smelled faintly of mildew. I didn't mind the fixer-upper vibe, I had time and not much else. That first night, I slept on a mattress in the master bedroom, the hum of crickets lulling me under. Morning came with a jolt. I woke to sunlight slanting through the blinds, but something felt off. Too bright, too high. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, scanning the room. That's when I saw it. A door in the corner, narrow and plain, one I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't in the floor plan I'd memorized, wasn't there when I'd unpacked. My stomach twisted, but I shook it off. Old houses have secrets, right? Maybe I'd missed it in the dark. I grabbed my coffee mug and approached, the floor creaking under my socks. The knob was cold, stiff, like it hadn't been turned in years. I pushed, and the door groaned open, revealing a staircase. Steep, wooden, spiraling up into shadow. I froze. This was a one-story house. There was no second floor. I leaned in, peering up, and saw a faint glow at the top, warm and flickering. My pulse kicked up. "Hello," I called, voice thin. No answer, just the echo of my own words curling back. I should have walked away, called someone, a realtor, a contractor, anyone. But my feet were already moving, stepping onto the first tread. The stairs creaked, louder with each step, the air growing thick and dusty. I counted 13 before I reached the top, emerging into a hallway I couldn't explain. It stretched long and narrow, wallpaper peeling in strips, doors lining both sides. The light came from sconces, old, brass, their flames dancing without a draft. My breath hitched. This wasn't possible. I turned back, but the staircase was gone. Just a blank wall, smooth and cold under my hand. Panic clawed my throat, but I swallowed it down. Okay, I muttered. Okay, figure this out. I picked a door, second on the left, and pushed it open. Inside was a bedroom, fully furnished. A sagging bed with a quilt, a dresser topped with a cracked mirror, a rocking chair that swayed faintly, like someone had just left it. The air smelled of lavender and age. I stepped in, drawn to a stack of photos on the dresser. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Me as a kid, gap-toothed and grinning. Me at prom in that awful blue suit. Me last year at the beach, sunburned and laughing. Then one I didn't recognize. Me standing in this room, holding the photo I was holding now, my face pale and wide-eyed. I dropped it, the edges curling on the floor. The rocking chair stopped. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just the furniture, the photos, the smell pressing in. I backed out, slamming the door, and tried another. This one was a study. Bookshelves, a desk, a typewriter humming faintly, like it had been left on. Papers littered the floor, and I snatched one up. It was typed, single-spaced. Asterisk, I hear them now, louder, calling me back. The stairs won't let me go. Asterisk, my handwriting. My words. I didn't write this. I don't own a typewriter. I threw it down and ran to the next door, locked. The next, locked. The hallway seemed longer now, the sconces dimmer, the air colder. Footsteps sounded behind me, slow and deliberate, echoing from where the stairs should have been. I didn't look, couldn't. I bolted to the end of the hall, where a window glowed with soft light. I pressed my face to the glass, expecting sky, trees, anything. But it was my house below, the one-story ranch, sitting quiet in the dusk. Except I was in it, unloading boxes from my car. Oblivious. I pounded the pane, screaming, "Hey, up here!" The other me didn't flinch, just kept moving, fading into the doorway below. The footsteps stopped. I turned, and the hallway was empty. But the doors were open now, all of them, waiting. I stood there, breath fogging the window, staring at the impossible view of myself below. The me unloading boxes didn't pause, didn't look up, just vanished into the house like a loop on repeat. The glass was cold against my palms, unyielding, and the hallway behind me pulsed with silence, those open doors gaping like mouths. I could feel them watching, waiting for me to turn around. My skin prickled, but I forced myself to move, picking the nearest door. The bedroom again, with its swaying chair and scattered photos. The room hadn't changed, but it felt tighter, the air heavy with that lavender stink. The photos were still there, fanned across the dresser, only now there were more. Me in the hallway, staring at the window. Me opening this door, my face twisted in panic. The last one showed me standing exactly where I was, staring at the pictures, my shadow stretching long behind me. I whipped around. No shadow on the floor, no figure, just the chair rocking faster, creaking in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Stop it!" I snapped, voice cracking. The chair froze mid-sway, and the silence slammed down, thick and suffocating. I grabbed the photo, me staring at me, and tore it in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor, but when I looked back at the stack, it was there again, whole, untouched. My stomach churned. I stumbled out, slamming the door, and tried the study next. The typewriter was still humming, keys clacking on their own now, spitting out words I didn't want to read. I lunged for it, yanking the paper free. Asterisk, they're closer now. I can't leave. They won't let me. Asterisk, my handwriting again, shaky, smeared with ink, or maybe blood. The footsteps started again, louder, from the hall. I spun toward the sound, but the doorway was empty, just the flickering sconces and those endless doors. I ran to the next one, a bathroom this time. Cracked tiles, a clawfoot tub, a mirror fogged with breath that wasn't mine. My reflection stared back, but it didn't move when I did. It just stood there, eyes wide, mouth trembling, while I waved my arms like a fool. Then it smiled, a slow, wrong grin, and the footsteps stopped right behind me. I turned, heart hammering, and saw nothing. The hall was still empty, but the air shifted, cold and sharp, like something had brushed past. I backed into the bathroom, slamming the door, and locked it. The knob rattled instantly, a slow twist, then a hard jerk. "Leave me alone," I yelled, pressing my weight against it. The rattling stopped, but a whisper slithered through the crack. My voice, soft and pleading. "Come back. It's not done." I slid to the floor, knees to my chest, and waited. The house hummed around me, a low vibration I felt in my bones. Minutes stretched into hours or maybe seconds. Time didn't make sense here. The knob didn't move again, but I heard it scratching, faint at first, then louder, clawing at the wood. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the room with me. I scrambled up, spinning around. The tub was empty, the mirror still fogged, my reflection gone now. The scratching grew frantic, echoing from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everywhere. I grabbed a rusted towel rod from the wall, clutching it like a weapon, and swung at the air. "Get out!" I screamed. The scratching stopped, sudden and total, leaving a ringing in my ears. Then the tub gurgled, a wet, choking sound, and water spilled over the edge, dark and thick, pooling on the tiles. It wasn't water. It stank of copper and rot, spreading toward me, slow and deliberate. I climbed onto the sink, the rod slipping in my sweaty grip, and watched it rise, lapping at the base. Shapes moved in it, fingers maybe or faces pressing up then sinking back. The mirror rattled, and I caught a flicker in the corner of my eye. Me again, standing in the tub, soaked and grinning, eyes black as the liquid. I blinked, and it was gone. But the flood kept coming, cold against my bare feet. The door burst open behind me. No warning, no force, just a silent swing. The hallway stretched out, darker now, the sconces dead. The water, or whatever it was, stopped at the threshold like an invisible wall held it back. I didn't wait to see why. I jumped down and ran, the rod clattering behind me, straight into the black. The hallway swallowed me whole, the darkness so thick it pressed against my eyes. I ran blind, hands groping the walls, the peeling paper slick under my fingers. The sconces were cold now, their flames snuffed out, and the air tasted stale, like a tomb sealed too long. My bare feet slapped the floor, the sound echoing wrong. Too loud, too close, like something was pacing me just out of reach. I didn't stop, couldn't. The bathroom's gurgling faded behind me, but the house wasn't done. It never was. I hit a wall, hard, my shoulder throbbing as I stumbled back. The hallway had ended or turned or vanished. I couldn't tell. I fumbled along it, feeling for a door, a window, anything. My fingers brushed a frame, then a knob, and I twisted it, shoving my weight against the wood. It gave way, spilling me into a room I hadn't seen before. Soft light flickered from a single bulb overhead, swaying on a frayed cord. The space was bare except for a table, long, wooden, scarred, and a chair pulled up to it. On the table sat a photo album, thick and dusty, its cover cracked open. I didn't want to look, but my hands moved anyway, flipping the first page. More pictures of me. Me as a baby, me riding a bike, me moving into this damn house, unloading boxes in that endless loop. The shots grew stranger. Me on the stairs I'd climbed, me tearing that photo in the bedroom, me swinging the rod in the bathroom. The last page was blank. No, not blank. Ink bled across it, slow and wet, forming words in my handwriting. Asterisk, you're here now. It's yours. Asterisk, I slammed it shut, the bulb flickering above me, and heard it, a creak, sharp, and close. The chair was moving. Not fast, just a slow drag across the floor, inching toward me. I backed up, hitting the wall, and watched it stop, perfectly aligned with the table. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not staying. The bulb flared, then popped, plunging the room into black. I froze, breath shallow, listening. Footsteps again, circling me, soft and deliberate. I swung my arms, hitting nothing but air, and then the light snapped back on, brighter, harsher, blinding. The room wasn't empty anymore. Figures sat around the table, shadows at first, then solid, their faces blurred like smudged ink. They didn't move, just stared, heads tilted slightly. The album was open again, pages flipping on their own, faster now, flashing images I hadn't lived yet, me sitting at that table, me smiling with those figures, me old and gray, still here. The last photo landed, me in the chair, head bowed, hands folded, one of them. I screamed, lunging for the door, but it was gone, just wall, smooth and cold. The figures stood, slow and silent, their shapes stretching, limbs too long, faces still blank. They didn't speak, but I felt it, a pull deep in my chest, dragging me toward the chair. I clawed at the wall, nails splintering, begging, let me go. The house answered with a groan, low and final, and the floor tilted, pitching me forward. I caught the table's edge, gasping, and the figures closed in, their hands brushing my arms, cold, soft, insistent. I don't know how I ended up in the chair. 1 second I was fighting, the next I was sitting, the album in front of me, open to that last photo. The figures were gone, but I wasn't alone. The house hummed a satisfied rumble, and the stairs reappeared across the room, spiraling down to nothing. I tried to stand, couldn't. My hands wouldn't lift from the table, my legs wouldn't move. The photo stared back, and I saw it now, my eyes empty, my smile fixed. I'm still here. The second floor doesn't let go. If you find this house, don't climb the stairs. Don't touch the doors. They're not empty, they're waiting, and they've got room for more. I moved into the house on a whim, a rental I found online after weeks of scrolling through listings. It was old, turn of the century with a wraparound porch and ivy choking the brick, but the price was right and I needed out of my last place fast. The landlord mailed me the keys, no questions, no tour. When I pulled up that first day, gravel crunching under my tires, it felt familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. I shook it off, hauled my boxes inside, and figured I'd make it home. The air smelled of cedar and dust, and the floors groaned underfoot, but it was mine for now. The weirdness started small. I was unpacking in the living room, stacking books on a warped shelf, when I found it, a toy car, red and scratched, half buried under a loose floorboard. My toy car? The one I'd lost when I was 6, the one I'd cried over for days. I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers, and frowned. I'd never lived here. My childhood was spent in a different state, a different house, suburban, beige, nothing like this. I set it on the shelf, uneasy, and kept unpacking. Coincidences happen, I told myself. That night, I slept in the bedroom upstairs, a lumpy mattress under a slanted ceiling. I woke to a sound soft like chalk on pavement. I flicked on the lamp, blinking against the glare, and saw it. A drawing on the wall, crayon lines jagged and bright. A stick figure with my hair, my eyes, standing under a tree. I'd drawn that when I was 8, a dumb little sketch I'd gotten grounded for scrawling on my bedroom door. It shouldn't be here. I scrubbed at it with my sleeve, heart racing, but the lines stayed, etched deep. The air shifted, warmer, and I swore I heard a giggle, faint, childlike, gone when I held my breath. By morning, the drawing was still there, staring at me. I avoided the room, sticking to the kitchen instead, brewing coffee to steady my nerves. That's when I found the box tucked in a cabinet, rusted shut until I pried it open with a butter knife. Inside were more relics, a friendship bracelet I'd made at camp, a mixtape I'd burned in high school, a Polaroid of me and my dog, Max, who'd died years back. My hands shook as I spread them out on the counter. This wasn't random. This was mine, my life, my past, spilling out of a house I'd never stepped foot in before. I called the landlord, pacing the porch while the line rang. Hey, did someone else live here before me? Someone who might have known me. He laughed, gruff and short. Place has been empty for years. You're the first in a decade. What's the problem? I couldn't explain, not without sounding unhinged, so I hung up, staring at the ivy twisting up the rails. The house loomed behind me, quiet, but I felt it watching. Night came too fast. I stayed downstairs, lights on, TV blaring to fill the silence. Around midnight, the voices started, whispers at first, threading through the static. Stay, they said, soft and overlapping, like a crowd murmuring my name. I muted the TV, ears straining. They weren't coming from the speakers, they were in the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Stay with us, they cooed, clearer now, tugging at something deep in my chest. I grabbed my keys, ready to bolt, but the front door wouldn't budge, locked, jammed, sealed by something stronger than me. I backed away, stumbling into the kitchen, and the voices sharpened. You're home, they said, a chorus now, familiar, my mom's lilt, my best friend's laugh, my own voice woven in. I clapped my hands over my ears, shouting, I don't belong here. The house answered with a creak, long and low, and the lights flickered. Something thumped upstairs, heavy, deliberate. I didn't want to look, but my feet moved anyway, drawn to the stairs like a moth to flame. At the top, the bedroom door was open, the drawing glowing faintly in the dark. The voices swelled, "Stay forever," and I saw them, shapes in the corners, vague and shifting, reaching out. My toys, my drawings, my life, they weren't lost. They were here, waiting, and so was I. The shapes in the bedroom corners didn't stay vague for long. As I stood there, keys digging into my palm, they sharpened, shadows stretching into forms I knew too well. My mom, her hair pulled back like it was when she'd read me stories. My friend Jake, slouching the way he did in high school. Max, my old mutt, his tail wagging slow and ghostly. They weren't solid, not flesh, just outlines filled with a dim, flickering light like projections on smoke. But their voices were real, cutting through the air, wrapping around me. "Stay," they whispered, over and over, my name threading through it like a lullaby. I backed up, hitting the wall, the crayon drawing rough against my shoulder. "You're not here," I said, voice shaking. "You're not real." Mom's shape tilted her head, a smile flickering, and Jake laughed sharp, too loud. Max trotted forward, his paws silent on the floor, and brushed my leg. I felt it cold, damp, like a memory pressing through. The keys slipped from my hand, clattering, and the house groaned, a deep, satisfied sound that rattled the windows. The voices grew louder, insistent. "You're home. Stay forever." I ran down the stairs, two at a time, the wood bending under me like it might give way. The living room was darker now, the TV off, the lights dimming to a sickly yellow. My stuff was everywhere, not just the boxes I'd brought, but pieces of my past spilling out. A baseball glove from Little League on the couch. My old skateboard, chipped and faded, leaning against the wall. A stack of letters I'd written to my dad, never sent, fanned across the coffee table. I grabbed one, the paper brittle, my scrawl staring back. Asterisk, "I miss you." "Why'd you leave?" Asterisk, the house creaked again, and the voices followed me, echoing from upstairs. "Don't go." The front door was still locked, the knob useless in my grip. I pounded on it, screaming, "Let me out." The wood pulsed, warm under my fists, and the ivy outside rustled, louder, closer, vines snaking through the cracks, sealing the frame. I turned to the windows, same story, glass fogged and trembling, ivy threading over it like veins. The air thickened, cedar and dust turning to something sweeter, cloying like flowers left too long in water. I stumbled to the kitchen, lungs burning, and saw it, the counter, covered in more of my life, report cards, a busted Walkman, a photo of me at graduation, grinning like an idiot. They weren't just memories. They were bait. The voices shifted, softer now, pleading. "We missed you," they said, my mom's tone cutting deepest. I spun around, and there they were, lining the hallway, their shapes clearer, glowing brighter. Max sat at the front, head cocked. Jake leaned against the wall, smirking. Mom reached out, her hand shimmering, inches from my face. "Stay with us," she said, and I felt it, a tug, not in my body but somewhere else, pulling me toward them. My feet slid forward, involuntary, and I caught myself on the counter, knuckles white. "No," I rasped, shaking my head. "This isn't you." The house answered with a shudder, the floor tilting, throwing me toward them. Max barked, sharp, "Real?" and I fell, landing hard. They closed in, their light washing over me, cold and heavy. I scrambled back, kicking, but the floor was alive now, rippling like water, dragging me deeper into the hall. The voices swelled, a chorus of my past, my name on every tongue. "You belong here. Forever." I clawed at the walls, nails splintering, and found the toy car red, scratched, mine. I gripped it, a lifeline, and swung at the shapes. It passed through Mom's arm, scattering her light, and she flickered, fading. Jake lunged, his smirk twisting, but I rolled away, the floor bucking under me. The house roared, a sound like wind and rage, and the lights died, plunging me into black. The voices stopped, sudden and total, leaving my ears ringing. I'm still here, curled in the dark, the car in my hand. The house is quiet now, but I feel it, waiting, breathing, holding me tight. My past is all around, whispering when I close my eyes. I don't know if they'll come back, or if I'll fade into them. But I know one thing, this house remembers me and it's not letting go.